Welcome to The Sign Off, the marketing podcast for marketing people who want to chat about marketing. The good, the bad, the old, the new, and especially the funny. I'm Liz Hawkins.
And I'm Lydia Jones.
We've made marketing and we teach marketing. We have strong opinions, but they're held fairly lightly. This is not a podcast on how to accelerate your search or how to boost your followers. There's plenty of people out there doing that already. We're more interested in what brands are doing and their marketing shenanigans.
And every 2 weeks we'll be chatting about brands and about campaigns to see if we will give them the sign-off. And by the way, if you're interested in coming along to chat to us and have a topic that you think needs a sign-off, then give us a shout on LinkedIn or follow us on Instagram.
So, this is our first podcast, as
It
I
is.
said. So, the topic we have picked is the Olympics. The reason we picked the Olympics was because it was really topical. It was something that was hit the news nearly all over the summer. And it was quite controversial, I would say, as an Olympics.
Would you?
It didn't run particularly smoothly. It's had a bit of bashing, I would say.
I think people were a bit snotty about the opening ceremony.
That's where I was going. With
Yeah.
that, yeah. I'm not saying about the sport, but
Yeah.
So
Do you remember the time back in the day, 2012, when I felt the whole country was super nervous about the opening ceremony. Like, if it goes wrong, we're going to be a laughing stock. We're embarrassing. Oh my God, it's so cringy. And then it was amazing. And then suddenly there was like this huge upswell of like enthusiasm for the London 2012, because as a Londoner, as I was back then, I was like, oh, it's just going to be like, it's crowded on the tube, da 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 da. And then suddenly everybody changed their tune. I just thought that was so interesting.
I think you're right. I think we did get behind it when they got the opening ceremony right, because it really did make you feel very, very proud of being British.
Yeah, and it was awesome. And it was very, very charming, I thought.
Because if you remember in the run-up to it, it was all about, oh, God, English people are just not very good at customer service. How are we going to make people welcome? We're also not very good in situations where there's people that don't speak English.
Yeah.
We just tend to speak louder, that
And
sort of
slower.
stuff. So I think the fact that we could get it right for the opening ceremony really gave everybody confidence to how good we could execute on that sporting event that was so big and so almost out of our realm of thought, I think.
Yeah. And then the French one, what I saw online, people were quite merciless in their taking the mickey out of it.
Yeah, I also see we see it through the lens of the BBC because they did most of the coverage. But speaking to friends from the US, they saw more of the unadulterated, because it was quite cropped when we saw it on the BBC. They saw more of it, and they were really deeply offended by some of the.
Why were they offended?
Well,
what about?
It was all of the Christian iconographic stuff.
Oh yeah, they like replicated the Last Supper or something
with the drag
didn't they?
queens, and and I was a bit like, it didn't. I mean, I know, I'm not very good with these sort of things, and I just didn't pick up on it. I thought it was a bit naff, and I thought it was not what I was expecting France to come out with. I was expecting the food, the wine, the fashion. I was expecting them to go ham on all of those things. I just didn't get the whole religious side of it. I don't know why they picked up on that.
No, I found it quite confusing, I have to admit. But it was like chucking it down with rain at one point, wasn't it?
It was awful weather.
Yeah, they should have done it in the stadium, no? Why did they like have it all the way down the Seine? And also, to be fair, yes, okay, I'm going to compare it to London 2012, which was amazing. Because also, don't forget, James Bond parachuted with the Queen.
That was just glorious, wasn't it? Glorious.
And
Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean, you had that. It was just phenomenal. So yeah.
So I think that's what I was expecting France to ham up with, all of the French stereotypes. I was expecting French waiters on bikes with, baguettes, the whole shebang.
Garlic everywhere.
So I was really surprised to see the way they took it. I mean, I did like some of the nods to France. I love the fact that Louis Vuitton did the boxes for the medals. I thought that was really cool. I quite like the squishes that they tried to do of the Eiffel Tower, although they didn't quite look like the Eiffel Tower. I also really loved that the horse they had running down the Seine. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
But I didn't get what it was about.
No.
And I think that was more because the BBC chunked it up.
Right.
You didn't get the story of what they were trying to do. But yeah, speaking to my friends overseas, they were genuinely
Didn't like it.
no, and they were saying that in the US US brands were actually pulling out
Wow.
of their sponsorship and stuff.
Good
And not,
Lord.
so I mean, that's the thing. It's really difficult when you're from this source market versus that source market. It's really difficult to find out if that's actually true.
Yeah.
Or just a CNN/Fox News story.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, I think.
I think so, because obviously we're not American. We're not watching it through the lens of CNN. Who does the thing? Is it NBC, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who's the official broadcaster? And I think the BBC, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get the same thing year after year after year. And they do it brilliantly. And that's why I pay a licence fee, etc. But they are... The way that they do it is quite formulaic in the sense that it is... experts delivering punditry, essentially, and commentary. So they have all of the old athletes, they'll have people talking about the events that they used to do, and you see it through an expert's eyes, and they are kind of making it palatable for the viewer. But this year, I want to talk about Snoop Dogg, because that is what I was seeing online on Twitter, on TikTok. I was seeing viral videos of Snoop Dogg interacting with the crowd and interacting with athletes and being scared of horses and feeding a horse a carrot and things like that. Now, I did some digging because I wanted to talk about it. And Snoop Dogg was officially a representative of NBC. He was paid by them allegedly $500,000 a day. So that's roughly around 8 to 10 million for the whole coverage. And I thought it was a really, really interesting choice. Now, over in the UK, Snoop Dogg has been in quite a number of different adverts. Just Eat, for example. He was quite funny in that, I thought. And he's been in a whole bunch of other stuff. So he is quite used to the kind of sponsorship corporate world, right?
And he normally does it well, let's be honest.
He is an entertainer at heart, obviously. And what I really liked about him is that aside from the BBC model, which is we're going to give you the expert view.
And God bless Claire Balding.
Oh, I love Claire Balding so much. Who doesn't? But that's the sort of expertise, old way of doing it. Mm-hmm. Whereas Snoop Dogg is the viewer. He's an enthusiastic amateur who is basically giving good vibes for the audience. And that's what overwhelmingly people were like when they were watching it, because the Olympics, it's different to watching the World Cup, for example. The Olympics is a feel-good summer event because you dip in and out of it, you watch one day, you maybe come back and 3 days later you're watching something else. You don't need to have followed your team throughout the whole event. And so he was kind of dipping in and out, and he was being very entertaining. But I think why he resonated so much, and I think what we're going to see in other sporting events and the Olympics, is countries doing the same thing with their celebrities, because he resonated with the viewer because he was like a viewer. He's not an ex-sportsman. He's not even a sportsman at all. He's a musician. So I just thought it was a really clever choice. And what happened is that the viewing compared to Tokyo went up 82% for the network, which is a colossal increase.
Massively successful.
Yeah.
Massively successful.
So well done, Snoop Dogg. Plus, he really utilised all of the virality of TikTok and other social media platforms, which is, you know, what you have to do now if you want to really reach everybody.
I'm wondering if it was a reaction to that religious hoo-ha at the beginning, is that NBC reached out and wanted to, engage their audience again, because the American religious group tends to be really strong and vociferous. So I think that, I've no idea. It doesn't show up on Google. Had a look. It could be a conspiracy theory, but I quite like the idea that they pulled in Snoop Dogg to rescue it, and it's changed the way that we look at sporting events.
Yeah, I would imagine that Snoop Dogg's deal would have been done a long time, and he would have been preparing for it and researching and, you know, making sure that he knew what he was talking about, because you still need a level of expertise to be a broadcaster. But I think it was a happy coincidence that A, they got offended by the opening ceremony for many reasons, and B, Snoop Dogg kind of pulled it around for everybody, and it was a success, a massive success for them. And I'm sure we're going to see other networks do the same for other Olympics.
Because let's be honest, no news, you know, all news is good news if you're hitting the headlines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's Snoop Dogg. So I thought that was really, really interesting. So before we start talking about the sponsorship deals and who did what and etc., I thought I'd just give you a little rundown of, if you're thinking as a brand to sponsor the Olympics, here's what you're in for.
Okay.
The budget for the Olympics is 4.4 billion, and 96% of that is private funds. And basically you get money from the IOC, you get money from TV rights, you get the top sponsorship, you get all the other tiers of sponsors, and you get ticketing, hospitality and product licensing. So that all kind of accounts for the budget.
So that's a huge amount of money.
It's enormous.
But it's a well-known fact that host countries don't actually make any money out of hosting the Olympics. In fact, they lose money.
Yeah, it's a cost.
And this fallacy of, oh, they'll make it back from travellers, you know, but the fact they've been showcased is not true at all.
It depends how, and you're in the travel industry obviously, but like it depends how you're accounting for it and what length of time. Obviously you get people coming to the events and then they're going to spend money on hotels and flights and blah blah blah, but what about the long-term branding uplift impact?
You'd hope so, but there's been quite extensive research about it, because obviously the Olympics have been going a while, and there's more and more of these larger global events. But yeah, no, they don't.
No, that's so interesting. So basically it's a bit of a cost for them. So
which is why it's so difficult to get people to host it, which is why there was only 2 people that put their hand up for it for the next ones, and the IOC went, right, you and that's it.
Wow.
Both of you get accepted.
Golly. Yeah, that's so... Yeah, and obviously in today's world, you can't really be seen to be throwing around money in an irresponsible way. So that's how it's funded. And obviously the large part of this is through the sponsorship. Now, the Coca-Cola are the main headline sponsors, and they've been sponsoring since 1928. And then officially when the whole sponsorship program came in, since 1986. Adidas has been with them since 1972, and then various other brands: Panasonic 1987, Samsung 97, Visa 86, Intel 2017, Deloitte 2022. And your theory on Deloitte is it's not really for the exposure and acquisition, it's more for the schmoozing.
I think so.
Well, if I was a Deloitte client, I'd be hitting them up for a nice box in the stadium for an event, wouldn't you?
If there's anybody out there from Deloitte, let us know.
Absolutely. So what I can find out about how much it costs to be a sponsor, you have to have at least $100 million, and it's a 4-year cycle. So you sponsor the summer and the winter Olympic Games. Coca-Cola and a Chinese company are kind of the veteran sponsors, and they have paid $3 billion for about a 10-year deal. That's so much money, isn't it? That's such an insane amount of money. Anyway, Panasonic paid $250 million for their 4-year cycle. Airbnb paid double that for an 8-year cycle. So it's quite a lot of millions. What do you get? You can use your products at the games. So, for example, Omega has their brand and they are the official timekeepers. So whenever anybody breaks a world record or an Olympic record, that brand is there. They do all the clocks and all of that. You can only buy Coca-Cola products at the events to drink at €4 a cup. Ouch. You get to use, you're the only brand, so it's quite locked down in terms of, can you use the word Olympics, London 2012, Summer Olympics, Olympic Games, all of those phrases, plus all of the iconography around it, like the rings and whatnot. Only the sponsors can do it. So when you're trying to do some guerrilla marketing, which we'll talk about later, you can't really not really have any implied association official association with the Olympics.
Yeah, it's outlined in Rule 40. Right. I looked it up
I'm glad you did.
to find out how they actually specify what you can and can't do, and to say that they've got it nailed down. They've got it nailed down within an inch of their life, and also because this is such a valuable and huge enterprise, they are absolutely shit hot on making sure that people don't do that.
Yeah,
and from an ethical point of view, as a marketeer, you want to be cute about it, but you don't actually want to rip them off.
No.
So I think, fair dues to them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Have you ever done a sponsorship campaign for the Olympics in your illustrious career?
The closest I've got is, as I said, 2 Sport and Arsenal.
Well, the less said about Arsenal, the better.
However, what I will say is if you're spending that sort of money for the rights only, you're going to expect your budget to at least be the same to activate those rights.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to buy the media spots anyway, which are
creative,
colossally expensive. You've got to pay your agencies to come up with creative. You've got to do a global campaign, which is very expensive. You've got to have probably several spots actually over the time period, plus to make the most of essentially 6-month campaign. Plus all the other stuff that you have to do with the athletes and making sure your products are being used properly and oversight and da-da-da. It's a humongous endeavour. It's not just, we're just going to drop 100 million on an Olympic campaign. No.
And also you have to be really quite cute about how you execute your campaign, because it can't be over advertising. There's a lot of placement, etc. But you can't have, buy my shit now.
Yeah.
But mainly because,
off.
mainly because if you think about your global audience, like the BBC doesn't allow advertising, so there would be restrictions on who could look at and who could to see it. So, and you're also restricted from the cultural side of all of the other people looking at you. So what's appropriate in one place isn't appropriate elsewhere.
Yeah.
So not only is the restriction from the Olympics, but you're actually restricted by this cross-cultural environment that you're trying to get your brand across on.
Yeah. I mean, having done a number of global campaigns where you're doing multi-market stuff and it's all got to be one creative and you've got to run it in several markets, the temptation is to kind of dumb down to the lowest denominator or sort of be so generic in an idea that it's very watered down anyway. So just a few things which I noticed brands doing, the official sponsors doing, that I thought was pretty good. You've already mentioned Louis Vuitton. I thought they were great at their special boxes it was for the medals, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Which I thought was really, really nice. I thought their ad about that was a bit boring. Sorry, Louis Vuitton.
Yeah. But then if you think about it, what do you say? We made the boxes.
We made a box. I think they could have... I mean, Louis Vuitton is obviously an iconic French brand, all about heritage and tradition and craftsmanship. I thought they could really hand that up, and I don't think they did. It looked like an iPhone launch ad, I have to say, which is a bit brushed. Anyway, I thought that was lovely. I thought what Samsung did with their phones, they basically gifted their special flip phone thingy. What do I know? I haven't had a Samsung phone for about 15 years. But anyway, they gifted their flip phone to all of the athletes. And so therefore you got all of this social content around the unboxing. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. And then you had the victory selfies.
Which were brilliant. Come on.
Amazing. Yeah. And the shots from the podium, because who out of the entire global population will ever stand on a podium?
But you really got to share that experience with those selfie shots just by, the point of view. It was great.
Yeah. And they're always super emotional, heightened events and moments for people. And we all get carried along. I always shed a tear when someone wins. Because, you know what went into that. They've dedicated their entire life to winning that medal. So there we go. So I thought...
Cool.
Yeah.
So, given that you've had a quick look at how much it costs,
a lot.
Yeah, have you got any idea about return on investment?
So that is quite tricky to find, and I have to say, I did not find much evidence for return on investment. So there are a few statistics. So Visa, during the 2016 Rio Olympics, reported a 17% increase in global payment volume.
So, but Visa restricted, you could only buy tickets with Visa. You couldn't buy with any other card. So they're almost forcing you to buy their product, use their product.
Sure. I don't know if that was global overall or just local to Brazil, but who knows? P&G. Oh, sorry. Do you?
Yeah, I was going to say the card thing was quite funny, and there was a little bit of. I know you talked about guerrilla marketing. We talk properly about it, but now you've talked about Visa. I quite liked the fact that American Express have done quite a few tongue-in-cheek things about it, like when it was held in Spain in 1992, the Barcelona games, Amex were putting ads out like, when you go to Spain, you don't need a visa. Which, very cute.
Nice. Very demure.
Not quite, but I think that, it's a good way of, pointing out the juxtaposition, but I think that Visa, I much prefer enticing people to use a product than making people to use it.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of like gatekeeping and like locking people out. So I've got another stat for you.
Okay.
Do you remember the Thank You Mum campaign from P&G? It was
that was a while back. Yes, I do.
2012, actually. Yep. They generated over 500 million in incremental sales and a 20% increase in brand favourability. It was a very, very nice campaign, I have to say.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I think it was great. And I think it fit really nicely with the Olympics as well because of all that gratitude, etc., of helping me get there. So, yeah, I think it was great.
It fitted brilliantly with their products as well, which sometimes the linkage is kind of a bit shonky. Like, for example, I have looked at all of the campaigns from the main sponsors, and Coca-Cola's is just real cringe.
Is it a bit shoehorned in?
Well, I mean, drinking Coca-Cola, you can't give an athlete Coca-Cola because that's bad for them. So you have to do it with the spectators. So it is just like a hug moment. And they did this hug thing where like rival athletes were hugging on the podium and therefore it inspired other people to hug. And there was like, I'm drinking a Coke and now I'm giving you a hug. And I'm just like, oh, I don't like it. Anyway, so there we go. So that's literally the only data I could find.
I think that going back to your point about ROI, I think as a guerrilla marketer, you could be quite cute without being saddled with that huge amount of initial cost.
And the enormous amount of restrictions. So what is interesting about the kind of official sponsoring versus having a campaign that is Olympics-based but not, what's the word?
Competing? Encroaching?
Encroaching, yeah, that's good. Okay.
Without encroaching into Olympic sponsorships.
Into official territories.
Rule 40.
So, what is really interesting is this is really typified by the Nike versus Adidas debate. Okay, so Nike, just a bit of context, Nike have had Just Do It since the 70s, yeah? And it's been their line and been their philosophy and their campaigns since then, and they have pretty much done multiple campaigns every single year with that line. Adidas, I can't remember exactly the number of times they've changed their line, but it is into the kind of 20 to 30 mark over the same time period. Maybe it's in the teens, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, because I couldn't tell you what the strap line is.
Neither can I. For ages it was Impossible is Nothing, which is fine. Anyway, they've got quite similar looking ads, you could argue. I think Nike do have a personality. Adidas are always kind of copying them, really, which is not the right strategy.
They have had a follower strategy for a while.
Yeah. So Adidas is obviously the official sponsor. They spank millions and millions and millions to be that official sponsor. I can't remember the Adidas campaign, but I can remember Nike campaigns around the Olympics. So, for example, let's kick us off with a strong one. 2012, Find Your Greatness. Isn't that amazing?
That is cracking, actually.
So they couldn't go to London, and they can't use London as their set for their ads. So they went to the 16 different Londons around the world. That's
Cute.
genius and cute. They didn't employ their professional athletes like they normally do, like Serena Williams or whatever. They employed teenagers from London to feature in their spots. And obviously the headline spot was that fat kid walking, like running, and it was just silent, and it was a wide shot, and he just ran towards the camera, and it was Find Your Greatness. And I think there was a monologue to go with it. And I just thought that campaign was amazing. There was other iterations of it where there was like, I remember like a kid like waiting to jump off a high diving board and
Yes,
things
I
like that.
also remember that.
So Nike does a brilliant guerrilla, I think you can call it. So much so that various different statistics come out. But I found this. Forbes magazine found that 58% of people thought Nike was the official sponsor, compared to 24% of people who thought Adidas was. Can you imagine spending all of that money and all of that time and effort, plus all of the extra money you have to spend to actually create the campaigns?
And still 40% of your audience don't realise it.
Don't realise. It's just wasted money. I mean, I think Adidas does have strong branding. You know, obviously Nike have got the swoosh, but Adidas got the 3 stripes.
Yep.
So they are distinctive. I just think they're not very
Do you know what I think?
bold.
I think you're right. I also think that, you know, Nike being the official sponsor, you're so forced into a box with that sponsorship campaign that the sheer creativity of that campaign got the views, and it was so emotional as well. People buy into it,
And it is related to, you know, the top athletes, but it also taps into a thing about ordinary people doing sports. And Nike's entire strategy or belief is, if you've got a body, you're an athlete. And their whole reason for being is to give you a kick up the bum to get you off the sofa and into your shoes and out the door. And that's it. They don't tell you how to train. Well, they do a little bit, but that's kind of extra stuff. But what they always do in their ads is inspire you
to just do it.
Exactly. So I thought Find Your Greatness was brilliant, and the results were clear in the sense that people mistake Nike for Adidas. And what they also do, because you're not restricted when it comes to the athletes. So Nike basically sponsor the athletes rather than the actual games. So they will be seen in Nike shoes, Nike tops, Nike this, Nike that. But
do you not think that's a bit bland? You expect sports people to be wearing sportswear?
Yeah, true. But it's very conscious that top athletes are seen in Nike stuff, because I think maybe Nike have got a bit of a problem with their product premiumness, in the sense that, are they really seen as the pick for top athletes? Whereas something like how do you say that brand name, Asics or Asics or whatever they're called, Asics, that's the one. They're the top choice for runners. I know that much. Actual runners who know what they're talking about. You wouldn't buy a pair of Nike trainers to run a marathon in, would you?
I don't know. I'd never run a marathon, to be quite honest.
Can't even run down the street.
But on your point about the intent of dressing your athletes in your logo, for want of a better word, but there will be athletes that don't have sponsorship. They're on that starting line that are still wearing Nike because
Absolutely.
They're comfortable in it. It's what they've been training in,
and it's good gear.
It is good gear. I'm not dissing it, but what I'm saying is that's free for Nike, and that's why I don't know. I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in here. I really like this new logo, no logo brand, that are offering a black strip with no logo on it for unsponsored athletes.
Interesting.
That allows the athlete to not be exploited in that they're wearing a logo for somebody that they're not getting paid for, but also to signal to sponsors that I haven't got one, that I need help, that I've made it to the Olympics on my family's support. So I think that's a really nice. I mean, I'm sure they're very, very small and nowhere near the size of, Nike or Adidas, but I quite like that. And I think that it should be, given the spirit of the Olympics, I think it should be that if you are not being paid to wear a logo, you shouldn't have to, and you shouldn't be expected to. And I think you should be able to wear a non-branded top or whatever you want, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea. Really
because, if you look at things like women's sport, which is wholly unrepresentative and unsupported with lacking in money, they're all trotting around in Adidas or Nike. And, the guys have, probably provided the strip or a small amount of funding, but nowhere near what the boys are getting.
Yes, indeed.
So that's what I think on the return on investment betting.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging, isn't it? Because also, how do you calculate that, really? It's a huge global event, and it's depending on whether or not you sponsor it for 4 years or 40 years. Like, really, what's going on?
I think it depends which part of the building you're sat in. If you're in finance, the answer is absolutely categorically no. If you're a little bit higher up in marketing, you'll have scraped together every PR spot, every free news article, every good bit of publicity, every share of voice.
Yeah.
And, you will have come up with a huge number of the reach that you got and the conversion and all the rest of it. So I think that, to your point, I think it depends where you're sitting.
Yeah. And if you're sitting in, we need sales out of this, or we need to change or elevate our brand perception amongst a certain type of person, then it's really different. So I think you have to be, if you're going to sponsor the Olympics or any kind of event, really, if it's like, grassroots football, then you have to be very clear about your objectives and to be realistic about your expectations.
And I think you need to go into it knowing it's going to cost you a lot more than you think it's going to cost you.
Yes.
Okay, so moving along. So we've talked about ROI, we've talked about the high cost with some of the restrictions. What about if we do a little bit more about the ambush marketing? Now, there's obviously huge amounts of restrictions about what can or does or doesn't contribute to being stepping over the line and or encroaching into Olympic rules. But I think that we've given some really good examples of how people can be creative around it without doing that.
Yes.
So that I think that from that point, I think the ambush strategy isn't one to throw away too quickly.
No, I think so. And I think you're also the level of creativity that is available to you if you are not an official sponsor, but you want to do something around that time, I would imagine is greater than, right, we have to have this amount of spots and we have to have these kinds of formats and we have to say this and and it has to reach this audience and it can't offend anybody. And, I would, if I'm working on a brief, I'd prefer the former brief.
I was about to say, which one would you do?
I would totally be the Nike rather than the Adidas.
Oh, yeah, massively.
You know, and I think it's much more fun as well because you are restricted because you can't encroach on all of the Olympic rules about we can't say the Olympics, we can't say the name of the place, we can't say this, we can't say that. But I think there is a lot more idea territory than we are an official proud to be the official sponsor of the Olympic Games.
I agree. I think that also not only have you got your kind of blank sheet of paper, you've got that opportunity not to be shoehorned into a particular spot. And you can really talk about your own brand values, your own mission, your own territory, as it were, and dial up what you want to talk about. And I think that stops it being contrived like the Coke hug thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on, we've just assumed that everything's gone tickety-boo apart from the opening ceremony. But there have been controversial things that have happened with, athletes not performing well when they've been using sponsors' products in Olympics. So there is an opportunity that this sponsorship doesn't go well. You've spunked out all of this money and it hasn't gone well.
Yeah, what a nightmare.
Yeah. And, you're on a unbelievably massive stage.
Yeah. Lots of people are going to get fired. Hold on to your knickers.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be nervous. If I was the, CMO of Visa, global CMO of Visa, and it was my job to oversee the Olympic sponsorship, like that you're going to be working hard for a long time in the run up to that event and post it as well, because you obviously want to capitalise on what's happened and try and make the honeymoon period as long as possible. So, yeah, I do not envy those people.
No. And then you've also got, as a brand, you've also got stuff that, you've got the actual execution things that you do have some sort of control over. But with it being such a massive global event, you have no control over some of the environmental concerns, the corruption, some of the human rights issues. You've got things like, especially in, maybe not in Paris, but when you go a little bit further afield into the Middle East or into Africa, where you've got awful things like, clearing for events and moving people away and all of that sort of stuff that, tarnishes your brand as an official sponsor.
Absolutely. I think, when the World Cup was held in Qatar, I think that was really problematic for a lot of the viewers and the workers who created the events and the stadiums and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think,
That was Beijing as well.
Yeah. And so I think it is difficult as an official sponsor. Like, do you pull out? You've signed a deal. Like, I mean, look at, Coca-Cola's just signed a 10+ year deal. And they don't know where it's going to go in 10 years, do they? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but...
FIFA in Qatar. Disaster.
Yeah. I mean, really, really troubling. So, yeah, that is also a consideration if you're going to be an official sponsor. And I think also, if you're an unofficial participant as a brand, let's say, you have a lot more flexibility to go, are we going to run this campaign? Oh no, there's a horrendous human rights scandal happening in the year building up to it. No, actually, no, we're going to spend our money elsewhere.
Yep.
So
I think you've got a better opportunity of also brushing it off and you're not part of it.
Yeah.
I think, so I think negative publicity falls squarely in the non-sponsorship camp. You were saying that you want the honeymoon period to last as long as possible, but actually the Olympics is only 19 days.
Well, you do have the Paralympics as well, don't forget.
Does that include in your sponsorship?
I'm not actually sure. I'm pretty sure it does. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it does. Anyone want to comment or like or whatever, however people interact with us? We got an email address as well, haven't we, Liz? Yeah.
I'd be pretty shocked if it didn't.
And say, does this include basically it's about including when the games are on, it's a couple of months, basically. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you've got the lead up. That's an extra month, let's say.
I think I think in your source market it has, but if you think about us, were we that focused on the Olympics?
I don't really know. I mean, the case study that I'm going to come out and talk about at the end, a bit of a spoiler for you guys, is Under Armour, 2012 again, my favourite year, and their Michael Phelps campaign. They launched it in March.
Wow. Okay, so they gave it a massive run up. And that Under Armour is a UK brand? US brand. So okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you get 3 months, 4 months out of it.
Yeah. So it's a lot. But if you think about, okay, what's the kind of equivalent in this country? Christmas. Yeah?
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
Christmas is from the beginning of November to...
Soon as Halloween's over, let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, having worked on several Christmas campaigns, it was Christmas all year round at the agency. That was fun. I personally love Christmas. I think it's a great holiday. Love it. Songs, mince pies, the whole deal. But I think I worked on 3 consecutive Christmas campaigns. So I had over 3 years of just Christmas every single day in my professional career. I mean, obviously, like, there's busy moments and then, obviously when it gets into production, I'm not really involved. So I didn't have it like all year round. But the thinking about Christmas in January is odd, I have to say. So, like, for a person working on the Olympics, I reckon you're a year out at least when you're starting working on that campaign. So, yeah, it's a long, long, long time to work on something that is only 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's cost you £250 million.
Wow.
Oh, so much
okay.
money. Anyway, should we talk about Michael Phelps?
We can do.
Have you got anything else on your list?
Well,
you want to cover off, Liz?
I'm just glad you asked that, because I was actually going to say, in the pro guerrilla campaign, the contracts for getting sponsorship at the Olympics are horrendous. The legalities could last you a year. And that's also a cost that you've got to put up with.
Of course.
You've also got market saturation.
Yes.
You're in there with everybody else.
Yeah, I didn't know the actual count of it, but when I saw a table, there's different tiers. So you can be like a silver level sponsor, and basically it looked like there was just an endless list of actual brands that I hadn't really heard of. But there's only 14 top spots, and I imagine they are quite heavily contested and fought over. And probably, do you have to renegotiate every 4 years? Or, well, I suppose if you make an 8-year deal...
Yeah.
You don't have to renegotiate.
And I bet somewhere in that contract is a non-compete as well. So if you've already signed a contract and you are the official drink sponsor, you know, there can't be a Pepsi or a Red Bull or somebody else being snuck in there. Even on a lower tier, they would probably get sign-off from the guys.
Oh, yeah, no, you can only be the only drink. We're the only drinks provider. So, for example, Airbnb have got an 8-year deal at 500 million. I imagine they probably have somewhere in their contract that if they stop at year 8 and they're like, thanks very much, see you later, booking.com or something can't come in and be their replacement. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
No, I
That's
don't know.
how I would negotiate.
Yeah, I'd be a bit...
I mean, like, no travel brands ever.
I think that might be a little excessive.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you can like negotiate because it's a hard cash. You know, it's such a lot of money. Can you imagine signing that check or like doing the backs transfer for 150 million?
No, I can't.
It would be a payment plan, surely.
Surely. The thing that makes me laugh a little bit is that Airbnb turning up as being the accommodation sponsor. They don't own any accommodation.
No, they don't. It's all hosts. They're just a website.
So yeah, I think that's my 10 points about why I'm in the non-Olympic sponsor campaign.
I'm absolutely with you, Liz. It would be more creative, more fun. If anybody listening has ever worked on an Olympic sponsorship campaign and have got any juicy goss you want to share us, please let us know. Also, if you've been in the we've got to do an Olympic campaign but we're not officially sponsoring Olympic, also I'd love to know any insider info. What's it like? What's the brief like? How long do you have to work on it? Is it a pain in the ass or is it fun? Like, you know.
No, definitely. I would love it if anybody sent us an email or contacted us on LinkedIn.
Instagram us.
Okay, so that's the end of the main segment. Shall we move on to our case study spot?
Let's do it. All right. So when I saw this campaign, it was actually, it's not for 2012. It's for Rio in 2016. And I will tell you why. When I saw this campaign, it won Grand Prix at Cannes for craft, film craft. And I wept with jealousy when I saw it because I thought it was just so beautiful and so brilliant. So what was it? It was for Under Armour. And it was one of 2 that they did for specifically the Olympics. Now, they're not an official sponsor of the Olympics, obviously, but it was their kind of Olympic-y campaign. So they did one with the US gymnastics team, which didn't do so well, I don't think, but they did a second one with Michael Phelps. Bit of context about Michael Phelps. He's the most successful Olympian of all time, which it's for swimming, where you can basically enter like 10 events and win medals in 10 events. Whereas if you're like Usain Bolt, you can do the 100 metres and you can probably do the 200 metres and that's all you've got. So like it is a little bit of an advantage when you're a swimmer because you can just win a bucket full of medals. But anyway, he is the most successful Olympian of all time. He's won 28 Olympic medals, 23 of them are gold. He was in 5 consecutive Olympic Games from the year 2000, Sydney, and he retired in 2016 at Rio. Now, this campaign was for the Rio Olympics. Now, Michael Phelps was never going to do the Rio Olympics. He had kind of retired after London, and he said, I don't want to do another Olympics. He'd already done 4, and I think he had won his like title of the greatest Olympian of all time. But anyway, he was like... Then it's well documented that he went a little bit off the rails after he announced his retirement. He had a DUI. I think he had to go to court. He was seen with a beard and just looking raggedy. He was pictured smoking weed. So he didn't have a good time. And then, I think it was about a year or 2 before Rio, he announced, I'm going to get back in shape and I'm going to go one more time to the Olympics. And so this is what this campaign is about. And this is why it's so resonant and so brilliant, because it shows the effort that Michael Phelps put himself under, the training, the massages, all that cupping stuff that looks painful. He put himself in a heat thing and like ice baths, a whole lot, you know, and it shows you his training routine to get into shape to be the best Olympian of all time and win all of those medals at Rio. It didn't show anything about him winning anything. It showed him fighting to get fit and to basically become the best swimmer in the entire world. And so the craft of this is, it's a huge montage of all of his training. So it's kind of like a Rocky montage or whatever. But the music, the song that they picked was by The Kills, this kind of indie band called The Last Goodbye. And it's like a lullaby, a love song. But it's so it's like a heartbreak song. And it's poignant and really emotional. And it's quite slow and it's a waltz. And the spot itself, whilst it had brilliant montage of Phelps's training regime and him really like pushing himself to the limit, it was always it was intercut with kind of surreal images as well. So there was an image of him swimming an infinitely long pool, and then him kind of sinking down into an infinitely deep pool as well. And him kind of looking really moody and pained at like kids swimming in like a local swimming pool.
That must be what it feels like, though. If when you're training for the Olympics, you must feel like you're sinking in that huge pool when you're so tired. And I can imagine doing training swimming. That pool must feel like it's never ending.
Absolutely. And so I think what it did, not only the craft of it, it looked beautiful and it was cut together excellently. The editing was just top notch. The music absolutely made that spot. There's also another video on YouTube, and I do recommend you going and watching it, of Michael Phelps and his missus going into the Droga 5 or the Under Armour offices and watching the spot for the first time, and they both are in tears. It's just beautiful. And yeah, so I think it's all about hard work and sacrifice. And the line, it's a bit of a long line. It's what you do in the dark that puts you in the light. And why is that brilliant? It's more of a strategy line. It's something that probably I would write for a creative to then turn into an actual line. But nonetheless, it is exactly what Michael Phelps did. So we don't ever see any of his training. We don't see any of the athletes training, really. What we do is we see them win their race and them standing on the podium, and that's it. What it does is it's exactly what the product does as well. So Under Armour are all about compression gear. So you wear it under your tracksuit or your sportswear or your t-shirt, whatever, and it squeezes your muscles, and it kind of helps, I think, with recovery time as well. I'm not really sure on the technicalities, but basically a lot of like marathon runners wear it, and it keeps you warm, but it also squeezes you, and so it helps with blood flow and therefore recovery. So it's perfect for the product in a way, because it's the product itself is in the dark. It's literally shrouded in other people's clothes. You don't actually see it. And it's doing something in the dark. It's compressing your muscle so you can perform better. So, and puts you in the light, as in you win your race, you stand on the podium, and that's the light, right?
Might be a bit long, but it's very, very good.
It's a very, very good line.
So those of you that are watching us, we'll cut to it now.
It's the last goodbye, I swear. I have no regrets, for the past is behind me. Tomorrow reminds me just where. Can't quite
those of you that are listening to us, check out both of the links in the description box.
Absolutely. And we might even play out the track. Can we do that?
Copyright?
I don't know. I think we can play 30 seconds of it and we don't have to pay any money. So
Okay, well, we'll play 30 seconds.
it's such a beautiful track. Check it out. The Kills, The Last Goodbye. It's a lovely song. I just want to talk about Nike's latest campaign because it's also for the Olympics.
Okay.
Winning isn't for everyone. And it's the craft of it, you could argue, is brilliant, as Nike always is. And it's about like the kind of more selfish motivation of top athletes to beat their opponents. And this idea of like that some of the posters they had like my dream is to end theirs. And it's quite aggressive and it's quite fun, I thought. It's quite a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's also like leaning into some of the more negative aspects of human personality, which I think is great. I liked it personally. And then I saw our friend Kev Chesters talk about it on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And he said it's not based on anything that's true. Because, I know, it's really annoying. But anyway, because there's this whole idea in sport and in life in general where it's called extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic motivation. So this campaign is really playing on that more negative, selfish, competitive, extrinsic motivation. I can speak, honestly. Basically, I'm motivated because I want to beat you. And actually, in order to really be a top athlete, that is not going to be your motivation. It may motivate you a little bit, but actually the motivation is more intrinsic, i.e. internal. And it was really reminded, have you seen the documentary on Amazon Prime about Andy Murray's hip operations?
I have to say, I watched a bit of it, but then I was a bit icked out by it, I have to say.
So, if anybody hasn't seen it, I really thoroughly recommend it because it really shows what it takes to be a top athlete. Similarly to the Michael Phelps campaign for Under Armour, it showed you all of the grubby, dirty, horrible, painful things that you have to do. And it basically followed Andy Murray around for maybe 6 months to a year during this whole, I've got a horrible hip, I can't play, I'm going to have this really dangerous operation that maybe I won't be able to play, but I will be able to walk. But it showed you his training regime as well. And what was really interesting about it is that he was like, I've always just had it in me. If my body gives out, I can still keep going. I can just go and go and go and go, and I love it. And that's what you need. You need to love it. You need to love the early starts and the late nights and the ice baths and feeling like shit and just keep on going all the way through the pain, and you're just going to do anything. And that is what separates a great athlete from an amazing athlete and a world-beating star. And what is amazing about Andy Murray in particular, not only is he a great feminist, but he's also he came to his prominence around 2013-14 when he won Wimbledon. And look at the field that he had to compete with. He had to compete with Roger Federer, like the greatest tennis player of all.
Against that man.
I love him. I think he's brilliant. So Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, like 3 amazing once-in-a-generation tennis players. And there's like 4-in-a-generation tennis players. And they're all at the top of their game all around the same time. I mean, A, it's amazing for spectators.
Yeah.
But B, it's amazing that Andy Murray won anything.
Well, let's be honest, we haven't got an illustrious career in tennis, have we?
No! So anyway, I just wanted to like name drop that documentary if anybody hasn't seen it.
But I think you make a really good point about the intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. I think that, to be operating at that level, you've absolutely got to love every second of it, because if you had even the smallest amount of doubt, you just wouldn't put yourself through that.
It's massively mind over matter.
And just beating somebody else, that seems such a small thing.
I think it's satisfying, especially if you have a rivalry. But I think rivalry is really a media construction. I think, I
also think it's more of a positive thing, because you hear Federer talk about when he wins or loses against Djokovic or the the three guys that you mentioned, he goes, he appreciates the level of sport because it pushes him to be better.
Absolutely.
Not that I want to beat him.
No.
He's seeing it in a positive light, in that allows me to operate at that higher level.
Yeah, and I think it's an old-fashioned view. It's a very kind of Thatcherite 1980s view where you're kind of... And actually, I suppose you could... The horrible orange man in America as well.
I just think it's small.
I think it is. And I think what it is like this kind of... winning comes at the expense of someone else's loss. You know, I just think that's a really ungenerous...
It is.
Unsportsmanlike.
Yeah, because we all
viewpoint.
know that just because you won this time doesn't mean that you won't be on the end of the trip, the fall, the third place, or
Yeah.
just pipped at that point by a 0.0001 second. And I think that they must all realise that, you know, they live and die by that. So they have to be generous. They are part of a community because they are the only people that realise what it's like to actually live that day in, day out.
Mm-hmm. That's why they all shag each other after their games. That's what happens. Apparently, it's like a hotbed, the Olympic Village. Can you imagine, like, you are, like, you've just won, I don't know, bronze or silver medal, you're done, and then, like, you just hook up with all of these amazing bodies. It'd just be hilarious.
Can somebody confirm that?
Write in, if you've ever won a medal or even competed in Olympic Games, what's the Olympic Village like after people have finished their events? I've heard it's a bit of like Freshers' Week.
I don't know, Freshers' Week's a bit tame nowadays, isn't it? It's not like when you and me went to university.
I don't think anybody can afford to have like multiple nights out in a week, can they? Poor things.
Okay, so
I think we're done now, aren't we?
So that's the end of our very, very first podcast.
Woohoo, well done, Liz. I thought that was a great chat. Thank
high
you.
five, Lydia, high five. So that's us from the sign-off. So do we give Olympic sponsorship the sign-off?
I think you have to be very, very clear about your objectives and your dedication and your outcomes and your expectations.
I think if you were asking me, I would say no. No sign-off from me.
I would spend my money elsewhere.
Exactly.
It depends also what brand you are as well. Like if you're, I don't know, if you're a peanut brand, which I have worked on a peanut brand before, like it's not really appropriate to, I mean, maybe because people sit and watch on the sofa and you can snack on the sofa, but I mean, you can probably fit any brand to it really, but I just think it's right for some brands, it's not right for others. It fits with some personalities because I think it's quite a conventional thing for marketing to do. You know, it's quite old-fashioned, I want to say. I mean, it'd be quite interesting to see how these brands have really like used the content that they're allowed to have that no other brands can have and put it on socials.
I'm wondering if the official sponsorship becomes more like the Snoop Dogg sponsorship.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
and part of the execution and of the rights is that you have this personality that allows you to execute rather than it being that fixed thing of just product placement and visibility in the event.
Yeah, I think for the amount of money that these brands are spending, I think it's got to be really, really special.
I think it has.
I don't think it gets a sign off from me. If I was the CMO of, you know, MasterCard, I'd be spending my money somewhere else.
Well, I think we're both in agreement that Under Armour gets the sign off without a shadow of doubt.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still in my top 5 campaigns, possibly. Even though it's a bit disappointing because they could have really capitalised on that strategy for longer.
They didn't take it any further, did they?
Not really. I mean, I think because it's such a singular execution. Even the
Is that because they didn't get the sponsorship at the Olympics and had to stop?
I think also it's because maybe they ran out of athletes, but I don't really think so because I know like Andy Murray's sponsored by them as well, or at least he was. But anyway, I think they just ran out of legs, or maybe they just are a bit ADD and they basically thought, okay, we need to change it. Yeah. But I think that what you do in the dark sets you into the light or whatever.
That was brilliant.
I mean, what a lovely line. I think it could have been a bit punchier, but I think it definitely gets a sign off from me.
Yep.
And I think it's my favourite. It's certainly one of my favourite sporting campaigns. I mean, I think Drink Crazy from Nike was just phenomenal as well.
Yep. Okay, so I think that's a sign off from me, Liz Hawkins.
And it's a sign off from me, Lydia Jones. See you next time.
See you next time.